Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if we can gather our seats, and we're going to call the meeting to order. Energy and Utilities, Telecommunications. We're telecommunicating here. Take your seats, please. Okay, welcome to Thursday morning committee. First up, is there any bill introductions? Jessica Lucas, welcome to committees. State your name and who you are.
There we go. Thank you. Jessica Lucas. I have a RS number 21 RS 0008. This would authorize certain sales of electricity pursuant to power purchase agreements.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Any motion to move it out? Make a motion. Who said that? Representative Gardner? Well, to accept the bill introduction. Okay, second, Representative Schreiber. You know, there's so many different protocols, you know, you never know which one to use. So, you know, work with me here. Work with me. I can gavel people down. Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce a bill that's RS 0655. It would create a state energy plan, a task force to develop a state energy plan.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, motion to move it? Representative Gardner, second? Second, anybody? Representative Delper-Ding. Hey, you guys got to get something for us to do. You know, we're only 2 days a week. You know, okay. Any other bill introductions? Representative not Representative Fisher.
Thank you for the promotion, Mr. Chairman.
His Majesty, Mr. Fisher. This is KCC. Welcome to committee. State your name for the record.
Thank you. Jake Fisher, Kansas Corporation Commission. I have two bills, Mr. Chairman. 21 RS 0964, a bill pertaining to pipeline safety.
Any questions from anybody? Any recommendations to move it out? Seeing one, Representative Schreiber. Second, Representative Gardner. Thank you. Teamwork here.
All right, the other one, Mr. Chairman, is 21 RS 0965. A bill would modify KSA 66104 to include electric generation facilities which are not currently a public utility to be subject to the KCC's wire stringing jurisdiction.
Okay, that was a mouthful. Any motions or questions? Motion, Representative Schreiber, second, Representative Gardner. Okay, we're on a roll here. Thank you. They're introduced. Any other bill introductions? Any other bill requests or introductions? Okay, Sue, and none? We're going to move on. We had a hearing on 2145 Tuesday. Is there any kind of a motion to maybe bring that out and work it? Representative Delper-Ding.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to move House Bill 2145, please.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Who seconded? Representative Gardner? Berkowitz? Okay, Berkowitz. Any discussion on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, I have a hand up.
I'm sorry, you're cutting in and out. Representative Keither.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this was not on the calendar to work today. I contacted your office yesterday to make sure that since it wasn't on the agenda, I had other things I had to do this morning, so I'm not in the building right now, so I can't vote. But this was not on the calendar to work, on the agenda to work today. So yeah, I would ask maybe if we could please just put it off until we know that we're going to work it. I know it's not controversial, but it's a matter of that it was not published correctly.
Well, that's probably my fault. My committee assistant did say that, and I said we could probably get along in this committee to work it, but obviously we can't. So we will table that until Tuesday if you will be here in the building.
I will be here. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Moving right along. Jessica Lucas, Clean Air Business Council, you're up.
There we go.
Mic on?
Yeah, it's back on. Thank you. All right. Well, I thought we were working a bill this morning, so I'm ready to do my part. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Jessica Lucas, and I am here today on behalf of the Clean Energy Business Council, and lucky to have with us a few of our clean energy members, a couple who will get up and speak later this morning. The Clean Energy Business Council is a membership organization comprised of business owners working in the clean energy sector. This is primarily in energy efficiency services, distributed generation, which for those of you new to the committee is more commonly thought of as wind and solar. And then, of course, with increasing innovation, more of our members are also working in battery storage. Today's presentation will detail innovative solutions that the state can embrace through legislative policy and the KCC. These tools can lower cost, something I know many of you have been talking about, increase customer choice, and most notably, as we experience increased unemployment, generate economic activity across all 105 counties through the installation and maintenance of energy efficiency home improvements and solar panels for homes and businesses. We're going to maximize our time together today by sharing presentations and comments around two big ideas. Our first speakers are Stephen Bickle and Jill Ferguson, who will join us online from Liberty Homes. Liberty Homes is a nonprofit dedicated to catalyzing utility-financed upgrades of all U.S. residential housing stock by using a program called Pay As You Save. This is an on-bill tariff system, not a loan. In typical Kansas fashion, our own Midwest Energy has had a pay-as-you-save program. They were actually the first to adopt a pay-as-you-save program in the country, and they have helped more than 2,100 businesses and homes through the duration of that program. We want to replicate what Midwest Energy is doing across the state, and Jill and Stephen are going to share some of their expertise today about the benefits of this program and how we can do it. I would also note that in Missouri, they have started doing pay-as-you-save, and Evergy is also working on a pilot program on this regard. At the start of the committee, I introduced a bill that would authorize power purchase agreements. This is similar to the third-party ownership of the electric vehicle charging stations, which I know that you guys are going to vote on next week. Power purchase agreements work in this way. A third party installs and maintains a solar array and then sells that power to a commercial customer. For the buyer, for instance, say the U.S. Army or maybe a local hospital or school, they negotiate with the system owner for an electric rate, and this is often locked in for 10 years or more. They agree to buy all of the energy that's produced on site by the installation, and any excess generation is sent back to the grid, often through a net metering arrangement. Our bill includes businesses, nonprofits like schools, churches, hospitals, and military installations. And I'm really excited about working with all of you to ensure the best implementation of power purchase agreements in Kansas. Stanley Rasmussen from the U.S. Army, who addressed this committee earlier this week on the electric vehicle charging station bill, will be here today also to lend more insight into the Army's energy needs and how power purchase agreements would give them another choice to more affordably power their installations. Michelle Milburn is here from Stannion Electric, an independent electric wholesale distributor that was founded in Pratt, Kansas. And she's going to talk about how pays and power purchase agreements can benefit the local business economy, as well as talk about the differences of their company doing business in Kansas versus Missouri. You've heard me say it before. Energy efficiency investments and solar integration are rapidly outpacing what we're doing in Kansas in the state of Missouri. And we really need to address this. Kansans should be able to do the same things that their Missouri neighbors are able to do in regard to their energy. Stan Bergkamp is here with us from Mays High School. Mr. Bergkamp is a physics teacher who had a great vision about basically bringing the classroom instruction to his students in real life through a solar array itself. It's a very successful venture that they have done. All the stars kind of aligned to make this happen. And he will be here to share that with you and answer your questions, talk about the savings they've experienced. And our hope is that we can get policies in place so that all schools can do what they've done at Mays. We also have Malcolm Pradfitt of Good Energy Solutions. Malcolm is CEO of Good Energy, which is a solar installation company that was founded in a garage in Lawrence, Kansas, and today also while doing some work in Kansas, is primarily working in Missouri because the business environment is just a better fit. Before I turn over to their presentations, though, I do want to address something that frequently comes up in dialogue about solar. Many of you have said to me, I'm not opposed to solar. I'm thinking about it for my own house. I've had someone come out and talk to me, but I am worried that solar users aren't paying their fair share. This idea, of course, is that while solar customers can generate their own electricity, they do still rely on the infrastructure that's been developed for all of us because the sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day. And as one of our speakers will note later today, while solar customers do use less electricity, they still pay a monthly bill, and they are still contributing to the system. We should acknowledge that solar power does not mean free power, and users are still paying into the system. We've also never really considered the benefit that solar offers the grid, and I think we should speak more to that. For instance, if with the school that has solar panels, they're generating electricity for the utility in the summer and often using very little of what they're generating because their schools aren't in session. Summertime is obviously a very expensive time for electric utilities as there's an incredible demand for power. So folks that are generating power through their solar installs are able to reduce the need for utilities to fire up their peaker plants, and it can help them reduce costs as an expensive time of operation. I think another thing we have to consider in this dialogue is battery storage. As it reaches a tipping point in affordability and reliability, it's possible you'll also see customers abandon the traditional energy structure altogether. And I've had a couple people in this building talk to me about their hope that they can go off the grid. So at that point, if energy users are choosing to power their homes through distributed generation and saving power on their battery, then you really do upend the utility business model. So as a state, I think it's important that we have a dialogue about where we are going to be moving forward, and do we want to continue to protect a traditional utility business model of sell more power and build more power centers? And we can do that, but it seems short-sighted. I appreciate the conversations that have been happening around this building about the need for energy planning. I've been one of the voices in that and think that this very issue really highlights why we need to have an energy plan. I think there's a multitude of ways for this dialogue, but in regard to the utility business model, one consideration is that the KCC could convene a work group so we can seek to start to establish what is the best solution. We know things are changing and they're changing rapidly. But in the meantime, it is not prudent that we deny the adoption of solar technology by businesses and homeowners in the state, particularly when there already is a 1% cap on net metering. And I won't get into the weeds on that. I know we do have some new members, but we already have some parameters in place to make sure that solar doesn't disrupt what we're doing in regard to the utilities business model. And I think we should take the handcuffs off and grow solar to that 1%. But with that, I think we'll dive into the conversation from those who have far more technical expertise than I do. Stephen Bickle and Jill Ferguson, I believe, are online and ready to talk to you about Pay As You Save. So thank you, Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity today.
Thank you, Jessica. Mr. Bickle, are you online?
I am. Can you hear me?
I think I can. Is everybody else? Okay, if you're ready, you're up, and please introduce yourself and who you are for the committee.
Absolutely. I just want to, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I want to thank you for inviting us here today to talk about Pay As You Save upgrades for home energy, for home economic development in Kansas. So Liberty Homes is a nonprofit dedicated to catalyzing utility and finance upgrades for all U.S. residential housing stock by 2050 using Pay As You Save, the on-bill tariff system. I myself and my co-founder, Jill Ferguson, started Liberty Homes in 2019. Previously, I was co-owner and executive vice president at DNR International, environmental consulting firm where I spent 2 decades supporting residential energy efficiency and product rating and certification programs for the Department of Energy and EPA, including Energy Star and the Attachments Energy Rating Council. Jill was previously a Truman Fellow at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, where she led the Rural Research Initiative. She previously worked at the Department of Energy. So I want to start today by sharing what a few Pay As You Save program participants are saying about their experience. Before, we were trying to save for these energy upgrades, but now we can use that money for other expenses and investing in our capital. My dad loved this house. I wanted to keep it and work on it. My bill was running $500 a month, which is kind of high for one person in a house. Now I'm saving $100 a month. We haven't lived like this for a long time, being warm and comfortable. We see the potential to create hundreds, probably thousands of jobs. You can't send your house to China to be weatherized. We are engaging our member owners to make a rapid shift to a connected, technology-driven future filled with tremendous economic advantages and opportunities. So Kansas has the longest running PAYS program, established in 2008 by Midwest Energy. Now, Midwest mines the energy waste from buildings in their service territory, then pays local contractors to install duct and air sealing, caulking and weather stripping, and energy efficient windows, and replace old HVAC systems with new ones. Participating customers get immediate bill reduction. On average, they save $670 a year from the upgrades, which more than pay for the annual cost. And participants own the upgrades once costs are recovered. Now, Midwest did this without income or credit checks and at no upfront cost to the customer. How do they do it? By using Pay-As-You-Save. So Pay-As-You-Save is a utility investment and cost recovery system. Utilities create new capacity and peak reduction by paying local contractors to upgrade the housing stock and then recover that investment on the bill, using only a portion of the energy savings, so the participant's energy burden is reduced from day one. Now, all this without loans or liens or debt, no out-of-pocket costs, no credit or income checks, and participants save more than they pay. Now, PAYS is different from loans. With PAYS, the utility evaluates the savings opportunity of the location, considering the structure and usage history. Loans evaluate the person's credit, income, and assets. PAYS is tied to the meter. Loans are tied to the property. PAYS is available to all utility customers with no split incentive, so that in those cases like where a landlord pays, but the renter benefits. Loans are available only to property owners. PAYS automatically transfers with notice. Loans are generally not transferable to the next occupant of the building. With PAYS, the investment is secured by disconnection for non-payment. Successor customers continue payment, and this results in a 0.1% loss rate. In other words, 99.9% of capital and capital costs are recovered. With loans, non-payment triggers a full write-down of the unrecovered funds, which creates a 3 to 5% loss rate. Now, Midwest Energy's Pay-As-You-Save program in Kansas has inspired other cooperatives and now investor-owned utilities to support and adopt Pay-As-You-Save. Most notably, in your neighborhood, the state of Missouri now has every investor-owned utility either about to launch a PAYS or issuing an RFP in search of a PAYS program operator. Now, a common objection to Pay-As-You-Save type programs from utilities is that utilities are not banks. Evergy, Missouri articulated this position in testimony before its Public Service Commission in 2019, stating that Evergy is not interested in being a financial institution that holds loans or liens on equipment on the customer side of the meter. And we agree, utilities should stick to what they do best. Make capital investments that support their service delivery, for which they can recover their cost and earn a regulated rate of return. Pay-as-you-save programs enable utilities to invest in home energy upgrades, just as they do for every other energy infrastructure investment. Now, Midwest has so far upgraded over 2,100 buildings, investing $7,700 on average, and injected $16 million into their local economy. If Midwest Impact was scaled to all utilities in Kansas, 2 investor-owned utilities, 118 municipal utilities, and 32 rural co-ops, to make investments in energy infrastructure, Kansas would surpass Missouri's IOU-only PAYS program, become the first statewide PAYS program for all utilities. This would transform Kansas utilities into local economic engines that upgrade every home in Kansas, while simultaneously injecting $7.7 billion into the state's economy. The statewide economic development potential of PAYS is tremendous. Most significantly, it's in jobs. You're looking at decades of utility investment in retrofitting homes and deploying new energy infrastructure. That means decades of demand for local contractors, suppliers, and distributors. This is employment that pays well, has meaning and impact, and can't be outsourced. PAYS will also help deliver affordable housing and wealth building. By improving distressed housing stock, you keep folks in their homes and you build wealth, because retrofitted homes are more durable and more valuable. You also create healthier environments. Energy efficiency retrofits are proven to lead to healthier homes and reduce healthcare costs, especially for low-income households. And finally, all of this is with a strong business case for utilities. The massive energy efficiency and peak demand reduction will help regional utilities lower their wholesale bills and make strategic growth investments. We look forward to your questions, and thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you. I believe we have a few questions. Representative Delperdang. Oh, no? Okay. Any other questions? Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Bickle. A few years back, I know the KCC was really focused on identifying low-income housing stock in the state to try to see how we improve the energy efficiency of that housing stock. It appears that this would fit into that that model. Is there any data that you have as far as either with Midwest Energy or maybe the other states, as far as is this program being used by more middle income, higher income housing rather than low income housing?
No, in fact, most of the co-ops that are running these programs are targeting them to their lower and middle income households. But they're doing that not on a kind of income qualification basis, but rather what they're doing is they're looking at all of their energy use, and they're identifying the households that have high energy use and also high energy intensity, in the sense that they're small square footage, so they're using a lot of energy per square foot. And then they target those households. And it turns out that those households tend to be highly energy burdened, lower and middle income households. And they're very high energy intensity because, frankly, the housing stock is in not great shape. And so it turns out that the people who can most benefit are the ones that get the most investment, because the investment has the greatest return when you put it into those homes. Now, I want to highlight here that PAYS is an inclusive financing. So while it does sort of initially favorably focus on low and middle income, it is typically made available to all customers. And so you will get a mix of customers, high and middle income, as well as lower income, among those. But when the programs are targeted, there tends to be a predominance of lower income households and a predominant benefit.
Thank you. How do they find the high energy intensity housing? Is it a voluntary basis where people seek out the program, or is there a way that you or others go out and find it?
It's a great question. So because utilities, the electric utility usually, is the program sort of sponsor in the case of these pay-as-you-save programs, they actually have access to everybody's at least electric energy use. And so they themselves either do that analysis or they provide that analysis to a program operator who then uses the meter data from those households to identify those households that have the highest potential. And then they will overlay that with usually commercial data or public data from like assessors' offices on the size of the home. And with that, they can determine the total energy use and the energy intensity.
And just one clarification on one of the slides, it had the abbreviation TOB.
Yes, sorry.
What does that mean?
Yes, that stands for tariffed on bill. So pay-as-you-save is a specific type of tariffed on bill program. So tariffed on programs are where the utility is using its tariffed authority to make investments and then recover those investments on the bill. Pay-as-you-save does that, but it layers on a large number of like consumer protections. For example, requiring that only 80% of estimated savings are used to pay for the upgrades to ensure that customers have bill savings from day one.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I like what you're doing, but one of your highlights is you use local contractors to install. It's horrible to get a local contractor to come to your house.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you in my personal experience. And in fact, the leading program operator for pay-as-you-save programs got into this business because they were helping with recovery after Hurricane Katrina, and were encountering lots of people that had been subject to contractor fraud, where people, contractors said they were going to fix something, took their FEMA money, and then absconded or did a bad job. And so what they've done is they've created a program operations system, which essentially takes out of the hands of the contractor all of the tools that are normally used to manipulate the customer. So the way it works with this company, Utility, is that the customer contacts Utility. Utility sends out its own energy assessment data collector to assess the house, determine that it's a good investment, and gather data to identify where the energy saving opportunities are. Utility then does an analysis to determine what the energy savings potential is, what the total investment potential is, and then it creates a scope of work and a very clearly laid out kind of plan called an easy plan that they then sit down and walk through with the customer what they found, what they're proposing to do, and how the investments are going to pay for, how the savings are going to pay for the monthly cost. The customer is then given a list of qualified contractors that have already been, sort of tested and screened and supervised over time by Utility. They pick among those qualified contractors. Utility then sends the scope of work that they've created to the contractor. And the contractor has, usually it's 2 to 3 days to contact the customer and schedule the upgrades. The contractor then goes into the home. They do the upgrades. They actually have to take photographs of everything they do. And they have, including the measurements of how tight the house is, right? What the HVAC system performance is. And they have to send those in real time to Utility. And then Utility will sign off in real time that they have actually completed all of the elements of the scope of work and met the requirements. If after some later date there are problems, the person complains, Utility goes in and they discover that in fact somehow the contractor was able to slip through their rather stringent quality assurance and that there was some defect. The contractor, under their contract with Utility, is obligated to go and make those repairs at no cost to the customer.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this on? Yeah. Say, this sounds familiar to programs that I've heard in the past, and I guess the big difference is that this is, like you're saying, it's not loan-based, but
Tariff.
tied to the meter, right? So, so once the contractor is then paid by the utility, is that correct? So
That's correct.
that's what, and then you're saying that only 70 or 80% of the savings is used to pay off the cost of the investment so that the
Over time.
residents can have a bit savings themselves. Of course, their energy bills is dependent on their usage, so they may not feel like they're saving anything if in fact they're turning up the heat 20 degrees in their house. You follow me? So I'm just wondering, so when that work is initially done and they spend $10,000, I'll just pick a number, so that sits on the books of the utility, and then they amortize that over some expected payback period? Or what does the customer expect in terms of what 70% of my savings looks like?
Yes, so you're absolutely right. In no way does pay say to the customer, you must not use more energy than you were using before. People, if they wanted to add new load, they can do, and they sometimes do that. Typically, though, of course, people have gotten an improved home, new air conditioning system, and often they do see moderate. Initially, there's little to no, substantial change in the bill. Some see dramatic changes, some see moderate changes, and that's over the cost recovery period. And the cost recovery period is typically 10 to 12 years. At the end of the cost recovery period, then the customer is able to benefit and receive 100% of the savings, which typically is going to lower their bill 20 to 30%. And it might be their bill, the people that were living in the house at the time of the upgrade, or it might be successor customers.
I have a follow-up. So in that 10 to 12 years that cost sits on the utilities books, are they not, does that just sit there? It's dollar for dollar? They're not?
Yeah. It depends on the utility. If it's an investor-owned utility, so yes, they're recovering their costs over time, right? So they basically, the customer is paying both the investment dollars and a cost of capital, and typically the cost of capital is 3 or 4%, and so the utility is then also recovering that cost of capital over time. And if they are using their own dollars, obviously it just goes to their general fund. In many cases, in the case of cooperatives, they're able to access zero interest or treasury rate, essentially, funds from the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Rural Utility Services. And then they pay that back over time. Now, it happens that those two programs, RESP and ECLIP, which is the Residential Energy Savings Program and the Energy Efficiency Conservation Loan Program, actually don't require the utility to start paying them back for 10 years. So the utility actually is able then to cycle those dollars that are coming back into it and reinvest them before it even has to start paying back to the rural electric services. But it's just like an infrastructure investment, let's say a pole, but for a cooperative where poles don't pay them back anything, these investments, they actually recover all of their investment plus a cost of capital.
Okay, last question, if I can. So if this customer does default, in other words, they can't pay their bill, then this is written off, I would guess. The utility writes it off and it goes into recovery against all customers?
So if the customer doesn't pay their bill, and remember their bills are typically lower than they would have been before, then they're disconnected, and typically a new customer, right, will come and occupy that residence. That new customer continues to pay the tariff charge. Now, there might be a few payments that were expected that weren't made on the pay-as-you-save. So the tariff charge, the cost recovery period can actually be extended with the new customers to recover those lost payments. So it's only in the case in which, let's say, a home burned down or is condemned, would the total investment be unrecoverable? And in that case, it's just treated the same way as all other unpaid bills are by the utility. And the utility typically has its own sort of essentially reserve fund that it's allowed to, that it's set aside to cover the cost of unpaid bills. And so then that fund is used to cover whatever remaining amount of the loan and capital costs have not been paid yet. But it's only in those very rare cases where the home is destroyed, which is why you have this 0.1% cost recovery, a loss rate.
Okay, thank you. We got a couple more quick questions, and we still got several other presenters, so I got two more people on the list. Representative Samsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Greetings this morning from snowy Wellsville. I appreciate the ability to testify. I know that drives the chairman a little bit nuts, but it's incredibly helpful. I just wanted to make sure I understand. I didn't fully appreciate what was going on with like a hearing versus informational, but I do understand and appreciate all the good information and ideas this morning. And it sounds like this may be a bill that's coming down the pipe somewhere. But I just, in my written materials, is there something that I should be following along with? If this has already been presented in writing somewhere, I will confess my, I don't know what it is, but I haven't seen anything. But I do see that Barbara's done outstanding work in getting this, looks like the 6th revision of the hearing. So I know everybody's been working very hard. And so I figured if I'm a little bit confused or lost, I might not be the only one. So was there any written materials that Jessica or her team submitted, or is that to come later, Mr. Chairman?
I can have Jessica send that stuff to you.
Okay, thank you. That's all. I just wanted to make sure I was fully up to speed on it. And then, and not to put anybody on the spot, but it sounds like there may be a bill coming, or is there one that already exists with these ideas?
I'm going to guess that this is what kind of the part of the bill you introduced.
So actually, no. Pay As You Save is a program that we have not introduced language for. It actually is something the utilities could go ahead and exercise to do through the KCC, which we would encourage and hope to see them do and have had that conversation. We introduced a bill for power purchase agreements, which is the next phase of the conversation that we're going to have this morning.
Thank you, Jessica. And my bigger question too, and again, I'm not trying to poke any bears or anything, but the fiscal note or cost that might be associated with it, or maybe it's already incorporated in whatever resources or programs we have. So thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I think with the bill just being introduced and this not being a formal hearing, but rather an informational hearing, at such time as we would have that dialogue, then the fiscal note and all of those other components would be. But today is really to introduce the idea and hopefully start the dialogue.
Thank you. That's tremendously helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Representative Delberdang.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate you doing the presentation on this. I'm not familiar with Liberty Homes. I'm just curious, there was no address on here. Where are you located at?
Yeah, we're located in Maryland, and actually, right now I'm happen to be next door in Colorado. But our official location, we're a nonprofit that is incorporated in the state of Maryland, and we work nationally.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to break the rules here again for Representative Carmichael. I see you have your hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't intend to break the rules, but I was just going to inquire if there are written materials from our conferees. Just like Representative Sample, I'd like to see those. If on the other hand, they're posted on the website, I can find them there, but just want to make the same request as the distinguished representative from snowy Wellsville. Thank you.
I'm just picking on you because I said we'll try to take two more, but yes, we will. Jessica will make sure you get the material, won't you, Jessica? Thank you. Okay, seeing no other questions, let's move on because we've got several other presenters that have some time here. Next on the list is Stan Burkamp, May School District Power Purchase Agreements. Stan, are you here? Welcome to committee. Stan, would you please introduce yourself and who you are for the record?
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Stan Burkamp, and I'm a physics teacher from Mays High School. I feel much more comfortable this time of day being in front of a bunch of high school students, so I think we can make this work, though. So, little background, I graduated from K-State and then was at the time seeking adventure, so I joined the Peace Corps and taught in Africa for 2.5 years. And then came back and started teaching at Mays in 1993, and I've been there ever since. And one of the lessons I learned from my father, who grew up in the Depression and was a man of great wisdom, even though he had to quit school at the end of 8th grade, was that you were a steward of the earth and you leave the earth a better place than how you found it. And so that was a tremendous influence for me. And so as one who teaches physics and chemistry, I was aware of the debate about climate change and that. And so I also, being a lifelong Republican, grew up with Ronald Reagan as my hero, I saw the physical side of solar panels as well. And so in 2016, I had them put on my own farm, and I immediately saw the savings. And then I went to my superintendent in 2017 and said, let me go out and try and raise the money to put, at that time, the biggest solar array in the Midwest at the high school. And I said, if I succeed, if I fail, this is on me. You don't have to put up any money. But I've taught phenomenal kids for 30 years that are successful. And in talking with these kids, this is something that I think in terms of the greater view of the state of Kansas that we need to keep in mind, because these kids see what's happening and they want to be a part of it. So the very first night that I proposed this, if you look at that second slide, so this was Monday night, there was no extra credit given, but here was a group of my students that heard what I was going to do, and they showed up to support me. And so I've got kids all over the United States, and they heard about this. So this is from Allie Jensen. There's 4 Jensen kids that I've taught all of them. And what I see is, and I think this is true of the state of Kansas as well, is that these kids, if given the opportunity, want to give back to the state of Kansas. They want to give back to the schools that they came from. And I think this is a tremendous opportunity, and I think we need to have somewhat of a vision going forward as to how we can allow that to happen. So in November 2017, I went to the school board and said, I'm an old Peace Corps volunteer, let me dream the dream, let me go out and try and make a difference. And they said, hey, go knock yourself out. And basically at the time I was too stupid to know that I could fail. But I just had a belief that this was going to work. And so through the blessings and support of a whole number of people, we were able to, at this point, as of today, raise over $200,000 that's been donated. We were able to secure the financing that allowed us to take advantage of the, at the time, 30% federal tax credit. And this was an example of where a group of people that saw a vision and were able to support that. And not only, and literally 5 years ago, I wouldn't have done the project, because 5 years ago, solar panels were too expensive. The fiscal return wasn't going to be there. I wouldn't have done it. But because of the fact that solar panels have become so much more efficient, so much more cost effective, that's why I went and embarked on this project. And so within the first year, if you look at from just a purely fiscal perspective, even if the district, let's say they don't have a stand work camp, they just went out and they wrote the check for $400,000 and bought the system. We've saved about over $32,000 in electricity costs. That's an 8% return on your investment. I can guarantee you there's a lot of people that would be happy to get an 8% return on your investment in this market. So I'm not doing it just because I'm an old Peace Corps volunteer. I'm doing it because of the fact that it works financially. I see the savings that schools can realize. But I also know that when I went through it, like I had to reinvent the wheel, because I saw that there was no playbook in the state of Kansas for what I did. And so there was a tremendous amount of legwork that had to go into it. I had a tremendous support from Mark Horst of King Solar. I had a tremendous support from the superintendent, who said, hey, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. And they also then have realized the savings from that. So it isn't just, wow, hey, this is a feel-good kind of thing. This works for schools. If you want to allow schools to have this opportunity to save money, to be financially independent, to have more money to invest in the local economy, in the local schools, from my own experience, and I can show you the numbers. This isn't just like a pipe dream. I can show you the numbers. This is the return on this investment. Now, Mays was fortunate, and I'm not touting my own horn, but they have a Stan Burkamp who's taught for 30 years, who has a tremendous passion, who has taught phenomenal kids that have gone on and done amazing things. most schools don't have a stand board camp. If you're Pretty Prairie High School out in, Reno County, Kansas, you don't have that ability to do it. Are you, anybody from Pretty Prairie? Okay, there you go. I didn't know that. I randomly picked that. So, yeah, there's some burr camps out from around there. Don Burr Camp was, like my dad said. Yes, there you go. Okay. So, yeah, I won't get off on that tangent. I really could go off on a tangent about Pretty Prairie, but I won't. But Pretty Prairie isn't going to have that capacity to go out and do that, to where they can go out and have someone that can take advantage of that system, who can write the upfront cost, and if schools wanted to, and then if you look at the savings, they could pass a bond issue just to install solar. Bond money right now is about 2 or 3%. You're going to get an 8% return on your investment. Schools could actually make money on a bond issue, which is unheard of in the history of education in Kansas. But because of the cost savings on your electrical rates, schools can do that. But there's any number of barriers. So one of the things this is the advantage of what Jessica talked about in terms of power purchase agreements, is that you don't have to have a Stan Burr camp. You don't have to have someone that's going to go out and raise $250,000. We just have to have the structure that allows that to happen, where schools can enter into these agreements. They're immediately going to realize those savings. And it's going to, number one, I saw the jobs that it created. I saw the enthusiasm that was generated amongst my students and amongst the community. And here's the best analogy that I can make for those of you that are my genre. You know what slide rules are, okay? That's what got us to the moon. That's the distributive model that we use for electricity right now. You have a central power plant, Jeffries Energy Center, and it's like a spider web, and that energy gets distributed out, and that's how it's always been done. But that isn't what makes America great. What makes America great is the competition, it's innovation. And that's what I feel that Kansas has to have happen, because I talk to my students, and when they go out to California, they go out anywhere, they go, oh, you're from Kansas, kind of a backwoods, kind of thing. But if I would love for my kids to be able to go, no, actually we're not, okay? My school has solar panels. My state has passed policies that are progressive, and we're not tied to continuing to make slide rules, because that's what we've always done. Change the paradigm, shift to a situation where these kids want to stay in Kansas, where you generate good paying jobs in installing the system. Give schools the local authority to save money that they can reinvest in their community, in their schools. And from my perspective, if you allow these power purchase agreements to go forward, there are no downsides to it. So thank you for your time.
Any questions? Representative Schreiber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Burkamp. Question, and maybe you alluded to this with the power purchase agreements, but how you finance this, it sounded like that you had donations and so forth, but then you kind of contracted with a local firm that actually received the investment tax credits or something.
Yes.
Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, because obviously being a school, we can't take advantage of the federal tax credit. So what we did is we went into a lease agreement with a local company who could take advantage of that. So the system was actually built and owned by a local company, and we set up a 6-year lease agreement with them. So they could, at that point, that was worth about $120,000. So the gentleman that did that, his daughter graduated from Mays, so he was willing to, not necessarily, it wasn't anything philanthropic in the sense that he just allowed us to take advantage of that federal tax credit. So that was worth about $120,000. So what we did is, in round numbers, it was a $400,000 system. Out of the money that I had raised, we put $135,000 as a down payment. And then we took the balance between the $120,000 that he was going to get back as a federal tax credit. So that was like $280,000. We put down $135,000. And then we took the difference, what was left, divided that into monthly payments that we're paying back to them, which is about $2,000 a month, but we're still saving $3,000 a month in electricity costs.
When you say back to them, you're talking about back to the company that,
Yes.
that you leased from? Okay.
Yes, and then at the end of 6 years, we will own the system. So it isn't, so we get all the electricity that's being generated. But that worked for us because I was able to go out and raise all that money. Most schools don't have that capacity. So the advantage of the power purchase agreements is you don't have to have that upfront capital that I was able to generate, and that's what made that system work. Thank you.
Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you being here, too. Curiosity question on one of the pages there, you talked about you'd save 32,500 the first year with a cost of approximately 400,000. So looking at that, gross numbers, about a 12-year return on the investment, assuming zero maintenance. So it could be 15 to 20 years in realistic. But
yes,
what is the life expectancy of that project, panels, whatever you want to call it?
So the best estimate that I could see right now is that those panels are good for about 25 years. Versus like a wind turbine, where you're going to have bearings and everything that can go out, there are no moving parts. The only thing that could possibly basically go south is the inverters. So I'm going to give you all a quick physics lesson, if you don't mind. So the solar arrays generate DC current, okay? Then what has to happen before it goes on the grid, you have to change that into AC current. So you have inverters that change that from DC current into AC current. And we've got a bank of 10 of those. And so usually your inverter life, depending upon the situation, is worth usually between 10 to 15 years. So the inverters are going to be your only kind of maintenance cost. The solar panels themselves lose some efficiency over the years just because they get degraded. You usually lose about 0.5% to 1% efficiency over the years. But they've had solar panels that have been going for 25, 30 years and are still operational. So, and solar panel technology has been around for a long time. The first ones that were installed were in New York City, like in 1890. So solar panel technology, the only thing that's happened is just that they've become more efficient and they've become cheaper just because of mass production. So yeah, there aren't any, like that system has been online since June 11th of 2019. We've had one inverter that went bad and that was under warranty. And so that's the beauty of it. There aren't any maintenance costs to it.
Thank you. I've got a question. It's a burning question, and I want you to understand before I ask this. I'm asking because of your educational background. You and I are somewhat similar.
Oh, God, I hate me.
And I'm not pushing you in the corner. I want to hear your opinion on it, and I appreciate it.
All right.
Okay. Cadmium tellurite, silicone tetrachloride, hexafluoroethane, even lead. And keep back to the silicone tetrachloride. If it's an air pollutant, if it contacts water, such as groundwater, it releases hydrochloric acid. So the kind of the comment is some of these panels or solar may not be as green as one thinks, but back to the life project, the end of it, do you have a plan laid out for end of life? And are there precautions, disaster issues set up in the case there's a hailstorm and some of these panels get exposed, et cetera, et cetera? And again, I'm not pushing you in the corner.
I understand. No. I've asked the same questions. And so right now, that's kind of where the solar industry is headed. It's like, because they know that's going to be coming down the line, okay? They know that's going to become an issue is like, okay, how do we dispose of these at some point when you hit that end of life? And so that's a broader picture that the solar industry itself is beginning to work on. So I know that those panels themselves are rated up to like 1-inch hail. And you talk to everybody, they've had like up to 2-inch hail and the panels haven't been damaged. So here's my argument as well, okay, to somewhat of a counter argument. It's like, yes, at some point, those panels are going to have to be disposed of. But here's the other side is if you look at like Jeffrey's energy plant, who burns coal. My family's construction company worked with them and at the Jeffrey's Energy Center. And you have, right now, because the regulations, you have to bury all that coal dust. So no matter what, how you produce that electricity, you're going to have some byproduct that's going to come out of it. And so I would argue that, yes, at the end of life, I've got 720 panels that are going to have to dispose of. I have faith that by then we're going to have a safe way to dispose of them. But the other side of that is that that's going to happen one time versus I know how much electricity that thing has been generated. So if you look at like, this panel that shows like our net electricity usage, for 4 months there, we didn't have any net electricity usage. So yes, at some point that's become an issue, but in terms of over the life of it, I can guarantee you there's going to be a lot less environmental damage from potential 720 panels than a traditional way of, especially burning coal.
Okay, I appreciate you stepping up to the.
Not a problem.
So, no more, thank you.
Thank you. And again, we're running a little short. We got 2 more presenters, but we have 3 people on the list. If you can make your questions brief, we appreciate it so we can get everybody through today. Okay. Representative Keither.
We can't hear you.
I didn't ask for time for a question, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Mr. Vice Chairman. Okay, thank you. Representative Samsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't sure if Representative Depperdang had a burning question or a Bernie question, but from the conversation that followed, I think it was burning, so that resolves my heartburn there. Mostly, I just wanted to say thank you to our presenter here. The passion for Kansas, and especially small town from Pretty Prairie to Wellsville and all the other parts that are unheard of most of the time, it was noticed and appreciated, and equally the passion for our kids here. So my question for him would be very simply, if he would like to answer it here, but what can we do to help? What I really appreciated is sometimes it feels like we're just being asked to give handouts and give out money, and I can tell that that's obviously not the case here. So hopefully we can do something to help moving forward. I don't know the particulars, but I'm sure you guys are the experts, including Representative Depperdang. You're asking questions that just blow my mind. But whatever we can do to help, I'm hopeful we'll get some good things going for the kids from Pretty Prairie to Anderson County and all over Kansas.
So I guess from my perspective is that, and it's the classic Republican mantra, is that cut through the red tape, cut through the bureaucracy. Let schools, if this is what schools want to do, make it easier for them to do that. Because I know like where my high, it's a long story, but my high school is on the Sedgwick County Cooperative. We're looking at installing systems at other high schools within the district. They're on Evergy. Evergy has different rules and different regulations than the Sedgwick County Cooperative does. So it's just like this tapestry of regulations based upon which service provider that you have. So if we could have a uniform code that says, okay, look, no matter where you are, if you're in Pretty Prairie, Wellsville, wherever you are, if your school wants to do this, not everybody has to reinvent the wheel. Make it efficient for these schools, whether it's power purchase agreements, if they want to invest and own their own system, cut through the bureaucracy and say, okay, if you're going to do this, here's the playbook that everyone can follow, whether it's the contracts, whether it's the regulatory systems, whatever it is, make it simple.
Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. If we have research or reviser, and of course, I know we have a very good Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, and Ranking Member. If those are things that we can put together with our staff, I would look forward to seeing those. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time.
Okay, we also have a handout from him, or Stan, so maybe Jessica, make sure you get that also in the other packet. Okay. She said she'd send it to you. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll resist the temptation to talk about Bob Burkamp or his family in your committee room. We can discuss that gentleman at a later time.
Okay.
That being said, I hope everyone understands that I support the concept of solar energy. But some of the things I've heard here today raise a few questions. First, it sounds like you're anticipating perhaps a 20-year amortization schedule on your investment with a decrease in production of between 0.5% and 1% per year. So that means by the end of your amortization period, you are anticipating that these panels will be producing about 75% of the amount of power that they produce today? Is that the way this works?
That would be a reason, that would be reasonable, yes.
I was unaware of that. Second, following up on Representative Deplerdang's excellent questions, the end of, as he said, the end of life issues. It reminds me that Yucca Mountain has been discussed for the last 30 years. And as far as I know, we still don't have any radioactive waste in it. And I think it is a valid concern to think about what are we going to do with this? And do we need to be factoring the reclamation, recycling, disposal costs into that rate of return? And at some point, I'm sure some of the proponents of solar can help me with that particular inquiry. I had a third question, but I've already forgotten it. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just leave it at that. I do appreciate you being here today. It's a very interesting idea. I better just leave my remarks at that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Carmichael. Any other questions? Thank you. Oh, Representative Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Are the savings just for the school, or are you pushing on a net agreement back into the utility?
Yes, how about yes and no? Okay. I sound like a politician at that point. So, sorry, Dad. All right. You know my dad, that's really funny. So, because of the fact that we're a commercial system, we can take advantage of net metering. But so if you look at that graph that I sent as far as the production, like in April, May, and June, we produced more, and our meter actually run backwards. Now, if that was on a residential system, Evergy would pay me for that amount. But because we're a commercial system, we don't. That's just basically excess energy that we've produced to the Sedgwick County Cooperative that they're getting energy to sell, but we don't get any credit for that. And so, if you look at those months, even when we've produced more electricity than we consumed, we still have a what's called a demand charge. They look at the 15 minutes of maximum usage. So that's still part of our bill. So even in the months that we've produced more than what we've sold, we still had, our electrical bill was still like $800 to $900. So we don't get that money back per se. So what the district is doing then is taking those savings, and that's what's allowing the district then to have more monies available for technology, for teachers, whatever that is. And especially once we get done with that 6-year lease agreement, then basically all of those savings then stay within the district.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move along here because, again, we have 2 other people trying to get them all done here before we're 10:03. Thank you, Stan. And know the Burkamp name. Michelle Melbourne with the Stanton Electric, how it pay. Oh, Stanley Rasmussen, I had to check you next. I'm sorry. Stanley, are you here? Yes, I saw you. I had you knocked to go next. U.S. Army Purchase Power Agreements. Thank you. I was seeing you the other day, I think, wasn't it?
I was here. I'll reintroduce myself from Tuesday. I'm Stan Rasmussen. I'm the Department of Defense Environmental Coordinator for the state of Kansas. I'm also the U.S. Army's Director of the Regional Environmental and Energy Office. I have a 9-state territory I cover, but I office out of Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. I have had contact with Jessica. She's told me about the bill, showed me some potential draft versions. I've not prepared any formal written comments until I actually see the final bill language and know what I'm looking at, but I'll be happy to do that at that time. But I did want to make some comments about third-party power purchase agreements. In my job for the Army and Department of Defense, our office tracks all state-level legislative and regulatory development in the 9 states for which I'm responsible for. And I have 3 counterparts in the United States that between them, they cover the rest of the United States. And we track all state-level legislation and regulation, and we evaluate how that might impact military operations. One of the things that we've consistently been supporting around the country when we see state legislation on it is for third-party power purchase arrangements. And why do we do that? Well, energy is very critical to operation of a military facility. The Army's current energy and water resilience policy has tasked every Army installation to identify what their critical missions are on the installation, and then determine how much energy and water is required to carry on those critical missions, with the assumption that you'll not be on the grid for at least 14 days. So to do that, you're going to have to be able to generate your own electricity at an installation, create your own water, flush your toilets, things like that. And part of that energy policy says that resilience considerations should include securing on-site supplies of energy and water to support those critical missions. Congress is also supportive of this concept. Normally, military service can only contract for utilities to up to 5 years. But about 12 years ago, Congress saw that they want to support energy development at military installations. So they passed a law, it's codified in 10 USC 2922A. And in a nutshell, it authorizes military services to enter into contracts for up to 30 years for operation of energy production facilities on a military installation, and then to purchase power from those facilities. So this concept is something that we're supporting around the country. And in 2011, the Army created its Energy Initiative Task Force to look at the opportunity to pursue utility scale, 10 megawatts and larger, renewable energy projects on Army installations. And in 2014, the Secretary of the Army transitioned that task force to become a full-time office. So we now have the Army's Office of Energy Initiatives. The Office of Energy Initiatives has pursued a variety of projects, and I wanted to make it clear that having solar panels on an Army installation is not something that is unique. And I'll just read through a few of these. Anniston Army Depot, Redstone Arsenal, and Fort Rucker, all located in Alabama, have 10 megawatt solar farms on those installations. Fort Gordon, Fort Stewart, and Fort Benning in Georgia each have 30 megawatt solar fields on those installations. Fort Huachuca in Arizona has 18 megawatts of solar. Fort Detrick in Maryland has 15 megawatts of solar. Fort Sill in Oklahoma is currently looking at doing a 14 megawatt solar project and also adding 36 megawatts of gas-fired generation on the installation to help with energy security and resilience. And Fort Hood in Texas, and I got to be a part of this project, used a third-party power purchase arrangement with Apex Energy Holdings to install 15 megawatts of solar on site and have another 50 megawatts of wind power off-site. And the Army didn't pay anything for that project. Apex Energy had a 30-year contract with the Army. For the Army to purchase that electricity, they were able to take that contract to a lending institution and have that project bank financed. Those 65 megawatts, there's no net metering associated with that. 100% of that energy is consumed on site. In fact, the low at Fort Hood in demand in terms of megawatts is in the 90s of megawatts that they use at any second during the day. It's a very, very large facility. So I would just say in concept, we are very supportive of third-party power purchase arrangements. And part of the reason for that is the Army and really the defense services, we don't want to be in the business of being, of generating electricity. We just want to be able to contract that out. We'd like to be able to hire someone to come in and build, own, and operate. And we don't know if a solar project at Fort Riley would be cheaper than the energy we can get from Evergy, but we also can't go out for bids right now. We can't do that because of the utility laws in the state. So we support the concept of third-party power purchase arrangements, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time. And I would encourage you all to consider making this a formal bill and hopefully having hearings on it, and I can provide a lot more information at that time.
Thank you. We do have a couple questions, so hopefully we can keep them short so we can get the last presenter in before 10:30. Samsel, Representative Samsel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mine will be very brief, and it's actually more of a question or an encouragement to Jessica probably, but it sounds like there may be bills in the work. My question is, if there are going to be opponents, and usually there are, I didn't know if those are folks that we could get at the table to see really what their heartburn was and get this thing passed sooner rather than later, if we're going to go that route, obviously. But a lot of really good ideas here. I appreciate what we're hearing. If it's helpful to Jessica, obviously our leadership in this committee is outstanding. I'm at the very bottom of the ladder, but if I can do anything to help facilitate that with, I don't have much energy skills, but problem solving and legal skills is where I bring a little bit to the table. So I'll throw that out there, but do look forward to getting whatever bill drafts or things that come along. It seems like it is a good use of the committee's time later if we get the opponents to the table sooner rather than later. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I would just say, with anything, there are certainly other ideas and thoughts, and I do think that there will need to be collaborative dialogue on this issue. It is a good idea. It's something we should consider, and that's what I'm hoping by introducing the legislation. We can come together, find some common ground, and make sure that we're protecting the utilities business model, but also making sure the marketplace is open and available for others who need other tools. Thank you.
One quick one, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unlike Representative Samsel, problem solving is not one of my skills. I'm an expert in troublemaking, as I'm sure the committee knows. And so let me make a little bit of trouble. First, I strongly suspect you'll have to look long and hard to find power in the Midwest that is more expensive than what you'll find at Evergy. So if we let you all do self-generation, which I don't understand why you even have to ask the state of Kansas for that permission, I can't imagine how you won't be able to do that cheaper than the rate you'd have to pay for Evergy. But one of Evergy's concerns, like other generating companies, is that even though perhaps you don't have net metering, in other words, you're not selling it back to the power company, you are relying upon the commercial power grid and company for standby generation capacity. And they would argue that as a result of that, they have to have generating capacity to meet the need when your inverter goes down or whatever could happen to your own self-generation. And they would probably also argue that they're entitled to be paid for building the grid, the distribution and transmission network necessary to get that standby power to you on those occasions when you require it. So when we talk about Fort Hood, for example, and other DoD installations, are you paying a standby power charge or a grid access charge? And if so, I'm sure it would be helpful to us to know how that's calculated, how it works out, and whether you can still self-generate for less than the commercial power company, even though you compensate them for those occasions when you have to rely upon them. Could you help me with those topics?
Oh, you want to say that?
Representative Carmichael, with all due respect, we have another speaker lined up that I think is probably a more appropriate person to address that question. So if you don't mind, we will have
Well, with all
Michelle.
respect, Ms. Lucas, I would like to hear about that from the DoD's perspective. So if your next conferee is from DoD, that would be great. Otherwise, I'd like to hear from the Department of Defense.
You know it.
So Representative Carmichael, I think you raised good questions, and absolutely you have to work with the local utility. And in Texas, we had to work with ERCOT and the local utility and the transmission company for that project. And no, you're not out on an island. You do still have a relationship with the utility. But I will tell you that the project that was built there and installed there provides a net cost savings to the installation. So no matter how they structured the agreement with the local utility, the local distribution company, in Texas it's a little different because the utilities have been somewhat deregulated. So generation assets are owned by one entity, transmission and distribution assets by different entities. It's because of that deregulation, it was a complex arrangement there. But the bottom line for the Army was that it was a net cost savings for us. And we can't enter into any projects that are not going to be a net cost savings. So those considerations were taken into effect there, considered, and it still came out to be a net cost savings.
And I greatly appreciate that, because I think that's where a crux of a lot of the controversy lies right now is how do we compensate the commercial power utility for standby power and grid access? And so any suggestions the DOD has or what's been successful, I know would be appreciated by the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And that's something I can reach out to the Army's Office of Energy Initiatives, because they're the ones out pursuing these large-scale projects, and they probably have, not probably, they have more expertise on that than I do. So
that would be very helpful to this troublemaker. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Actually, I agree with you, Representative Carmichael. Very good question, because again, we still have to maintain the grid for the base load generation. And if we ever get to a 60% point, who's going to pay for all that maintenance and stuff? So good questions. That's what we're here for, just like Jessica says. Next up, thank you.
Thank you.
Stanley, Michelle Melbourne, Stannion Electric, how it pays. Try to get you through as quick as we can, and people can stay around and answer questions even if they don't have to go. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Michelle Milburn. I am a board-certified solar professional and a clean energy product manager for Stannion Wholesale Electric. Part of my role with Stannion is to help our customers in those facilities evaluate their energy profile, help to appropriately size and design systems, but even more importantly, model those production and financial models so we can provide good information for decision makers that is not just accurate, but also ethically put together, so they have a very clear output of what a system can do for them. I'd like to talk first about those cheapest sources of electricity. So we talked a little bit about energy efficiency today. And number one, the energy you never use is always going to be the least expensive. It's going to be 0 cents, and that is forever. Number two, renewable energy that you produce yourself. Especially using solar, we see costs per kilowatt hour between 2 and 6 cents, depending on the system sizes and incentives. Those systems are warranted for performance for 25 years. They lock into that low cost of energy for 25 years. That's what's attractive about these systems. And third, the energy you buy from the utility. And the cheapest right now is on a residential time of use rate from midnight to 6 a.m. You can get it at 4 cents a kilowatt hour. But then you've got to add the riders and charges and taxes that go along with that, and that's about 7 kilowatt hours, and it's at 3 a.m. An annual inflationary rate of energy in the Midwest is 3.7%. So our cost of energy from the utility doubles every 15 years. So Stannion Wholesale Electric, our first location went into Pratt in 1960, and that was when the cost of a kilowatt of energy was less than 2 cents. 17 branches later, we're still in the business of all things electrical, and our customers are the state's largest job creators, like Boeing, National Beef, Procter & Gamble, General Motors. We service the largest electrical contracting firms in the Midwest who are competing to build a better Kansas. And for more than a decade, we have held the state of Kansas contract for electrical supply, serving our state capital, universities, parks, prisons, helping us all make our budgets stretch a little further. And today, the name of the game is still saving pennies, no matter what size company you are. I've met with Boeing executives, hotel owners, facility managers, schools, county hospitals, and houses of worship. They've all done their homework. They ask, why don't we have energy efficiency programs like Missouri and other states? Why are solar policies changing every year? How can we take advantage of clean energy incentives as a not-for-profit company? We simply don't. And I'd like to share some very real examples of why we should. Our 17 branches, 3 of them serve our Kansas City metro area. Half of our energy efficiency retrofit projects are in Missouri out of those 3 branches, compared to the 14 branches that are serving Kansas. In Kansas, energy efficiency is almost exclusive to new construction and not our older buildings. Many of our industrial facilities subscribe to a program called Supply Force and work with vendors like Stanton with key goals to help them save money, time, and energy. And those 3 pillars are measured quarterly, and those companies compare those facilities to those in the rest of the nation. So when these companies make capital investments to expand a facility, they choose locations based on efficiency and cost of operations. For Cargill, this state's energy programs are the difference between growing jobs in Dodge City, Kansas, or growing jobs in Marshall, Missouri, where there's also a Cargill plant. It's a very simple dollars and cents decision for CFOs. Another example here is the Kansas Corporation Commission has a vetting process for approving energy service companies who provide energy improvements for state facilities under performance contracts. And we're working with an ESCO on a very large school district in the state to improve energy efficiency in HVAC and lighting. And they're also adding solar generation. Now, access to a power purchase agreement and energy efficiency programs is the difference between saving that school district $12 million over 25 years or $40 million over 25 years. And that's one district. Well-structured financing mechanisms like power purchase agreements open the door for investments by reducing that out-of-pocket cost and limiting risks. Even more impactful power purchase agreements are the only way to capture national incentives for hospitals, museums, schools, churches, fire departments, and charitable outreach facilities that serve our most vulnerable. A solar project can greatly reduce the operating expense of these facilities for decades. Will my company benefit from a power purchase agreement? Yes. So will other job creators, engineering firms, transportation hubs, warehouse workers, electrical and HVAC contractors, and food producers. Most of all, every taxpayer in the state will benefit from the economic stimulus and the reduction of demand for our already burdened tax revenues. Very rarely can government leadership take action that makes money and saves money at the same time. And this is it. These programs are well tested with proven results, and there is no better time to act. The federal clean energy incentives were extended for 3 more years, and if this opportunity sits in committee, fails to go to the floor for a vote, and we wait years for Congress to agree on a sweeping energy plan, you'll have missed the window and left Kansas behind once again. And we're already 48th in the nation in energy efficiency and 43rd in solar capacity. So you've got nothing to lose, and Kansas has everything to gain. Mr. Chairman.
Stand for questions.
Please.
Okay, is there anybody have any questions? Representative Samsel?
I appreciate the information. That was a bit of doom and gloom there at the end. So on a positive note, I liked the reference to Marshall, Missouri. That was my undergrad, Missouri Valley College. So I'm good to hear there's good things going on in both Kansas and Missouri. So that's my last personal comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Carmichael shaking his head. Do you have a comment there, Representative Carmichael?
Go Hawks, Rock Chalk, Jayhawk.
All right, seeing no further questions, thank you for your presentation. It is truly interesting dilemma we go into in the future with renewable energies. And you know, I'm an old guy, so I remember when we didn't even have electricity when I was a kid, so we was tickled to death to get it. And if we had a bill over $5, my dad was mad. You know, now if we have a bill under 150, we're pretty happy. However, I like the fact that when I flip the switch on, that I can get electricity. I understand renewable packages and everybody, we talk about the generation, we talk about solar panels, we talk about economic development, but I also had friends that sold Roundup, you know, asbestos, siding and shingles, and everything goes through a cycle, you know, and again, electricians, you know, energy efficiency is good. Helping promote it is probably one of the best. We've seen that in a lot of stuff. So I appreciate your passion for what you said and the way you put it. And anybody else have a question before we close on this? Appreciate you coming. If you'd like to have any comment on that, that'd be fine. I'd be happy to hear it.
You know, when it comes to the cradle to grave nature of reusing and recycling solar, that is definitely in the processes. So the way of the world is that way. We do the same thing with LED lighting. We do those things with other technology within the electrical industry. And I want to point out that power purchase agreements don't change the game when it comes to the state policies and the state cap on solar installation and net metering. That 1% cap is still in place. Because more people have access to financing availabilities and mechanisms, doesn't mean that the utility is going to lose any more money than they have before, which when we look at studies that are happening in states where they have 4 and 5% solar capacity, as in capacity of base demand, we're seeing absolutely no cost shift between payers until we start to approach 10, 15, and 20% of capacity. So yes, I do think we all need to be paying a share of those costs. I may be a solar advocate and a passionate one. I am also an Evergy shareholder. So I will tell you I'm not opposed to the capitalism that drives our economy.
Good questions, and that's the debate. And I again, thank Jessica for trying to put this talk and talk back. You know, it's a good talk, and sometimes an hour and a half probably isn't enough to do that. But the roundtable discussion is here. We got it done, and those are things to think about. So any other questions for the committee or the good of the committee? I know we don't have session, but if the committee members would like to stop by my office again when we're done here, I have some mountain lion salami from a friend of mine that hunted it. So it might be an interesting taster for you to say you've had a mountain lion. So with that, we are adjourned.